What exactly is the Public Intelligence Project? It is an independent, non-partisan think tank conducting research, education, and advocacy in 4 key areas: diversity, critical thinking, dialogue, and freedom of expression. The project seeks to promote more robust systems of participatory democracy, civic engagement, and conflict prevention. In other words, we want to create a culture of democracy. There are 1.2 billion people and counting in India. Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Jain, Christian, Buddhist, Brahmin, Dalit, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Harijan, Nair, Patel, Gauda, feminist, environmentalist, engineer, artist, lawyer, cook, doctor, entrepreneur, accountant. 1.2 billion voices, give or take a few millions. Charles de Gaulle governed a country with 246 varieties of cheese. That's a piece of cake. India is a country with 246 million opinions on cheese. Eat that! 1.2 billion voices speak of wants, needs, interests, and hopes. 1.2 billion monologues, ideas, debates, arguments every day. So how does each voice get heard? Universal adult franchise. Yes, the Constitution gives every voice a vote. Man or woman, rich or poor, upper or lower caste. Now that is a democracy. Democracy gives everybody a voice. Right? That's empowerment. Wait, is that it? That's empowerment? That's democracy? We get to vote once in 5 years? That's all we've got? Choosing between the almond party and the peanut union when we're told to? Is there more to choice than choosing your leader? Can democracies empower citizens beyond voting? Can voices matter more often than every 4 or 5 years? Can voices matter on things that matter? So how does one empower? It starts in the mind. Freedom to think, make your sense of the world, freedom to live with integrity, and freedom to express what we think. Oh, don't get me wrong, we have free speech in India. The freedom to ban books, censor films, burn art, and exile painters, the freedom to abuse unbelievers, infidels, apostates, and blasphemers, freedom to beat up women in short skirts, freedom to lynch lovers, freedom to shut others up, freedom to shut oneself up, lest we offend another. And that's empowerment? George Orwell once said, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. What is democracy without freedom? How can we just allow others to control what we think? What are we doing? Who are we fooling? Freedom empowers, and empowered people create healthy and real democracies. Democracies must respect the right to speak, the right to think, the right to opinions, the right to dissent. However, democracies do not have to respect your selective facts, your subjective evidence, your untested hypotheses, and your volatile sentiments. To empower someone, we need to listen to them. Giving the vote is easy. Listening is hard. Freedom to think and express, that's empowerment. Governance through constructive dialogue and civic participation, that's democracy.
Let's take a couple of questions if there are.
This kind of thing doesn't have any immediate results that you can't see it, you can't hold it in your hand. So how are you going to convince people that they need to do this?
It can take a couple of generations to create a true culture of democracy. But the problem is just giving time doesn't necessarily make that happen. You need to put certain structures in place. You need to have a certain kind of educational system that can actually foster that kind of thinking and can encourage people to have the kind of dialogue that we are talking about. And this is a long-term project. And if we don't do it now, frankly, I think it's entirely possible that even the thin democracy that we have may well disappear.
Just imagine the kind of illiteracy that prevails in the country. So should we not have a very balanced approach in the dialogues, just so that we carry the masses along? Because India, in its efforts to progress, in its endeavors to become an advanced nation, has to bring in all the sophistication into the democracy, but we need to be still careful about how we manage it, right? On the one extreme, there are dialogues and debates almost every day on the TV about the kind of freedom that we should have to talk about anything and everything. And we have another part of India which is yet very backward. So should we not bear in mind the complexity as we actually go about bringing this sophistication into democracy?
Unfortunately, there are no simple solutions for dealing with complexity. And when we say that there is a lot of dialogue and debate, I would debate that. What happens in television is not, by my reckoning, dialogue at all. It's actually absolutely unfettered argument. And what's that genius in Times? Bangalore goes one. He is an abomination. He's an absolute abomination because it's people like him who completely destroy the culture of discourse in this country. And he has the highest TRPs. And as a result, even more recent anchors are following him. I have to not very humbly disagree with that definition of dialogue, because that is what we do. We are professionals in designing and facilitating dialogue. And dialogue has nothing to do with the way these conversations happen in India today. So part of where we are coming from is we are talking of a completely different model of dialogue. What's the point of dialogue if you don't get people who don't agree with you? That's the one point of dialogue. When I was growing up and Amitabh Bachchan was the big thing, and he came on stage and gave a big speech, we would go clap saying, "Kya dialogue mara?" Not recognizing that what Amitabh Bachchan was giving was not a dialogue but a monologue. In fact, very often when two people argue, what's really happening is two parallel monologues taking place at the same time. Firstly, diversity. Can somebody tell me the difference between diversity and multiculturalism as you understand it?
Diversity is a very general word. For example, the life in the ocean has got a lot of diversity, whereas multicultural is very specific and referring specifically to culture. So, for example, India is a land of various cultures. So that would be the difference. Diverse is very general, and multicultural is very focused on culture specifically.
Okay.
Diversity can happen even in one culture, whereas multicultural just means that you have different cultures.
In this room, there's diversity. There's all kinds of diversity. And Sunny was right. You have diversity in the ecosphere. You have diversity in a pond. So diversity is a reality. It is there everywhere. However, multiculturalism is actually an ism, an ideology. And as an ideology, it prescribes what should happen. It's too complicated. It's too complex to have easy, pat solutions like we must all get along. For any democracy, managing diversity becomes one of the first things. And at the point of economic diversity is a huge thing. There's a problem here. And this for me is a problem of education. Our education does not teach us how to listen. We're developing curricula, both for the schools and the colleges. And we want to, at some point, after piloting it, take it to the NCERT or the Department of Education and see if we can get some traction there. Has been working over the past 9 years is managing differences and managing diversity, not just in India but in other parts of the world. And one of the biggest challenges that we face is in societies where people are silenced, voices are silenced, and groups are silenced, it becomes almost impossible to have any kind of a dialogue or negotiation. Because the basic premise of negotiation, and negotiation is a part of dialogue, is that I must be able to say what I truly believe without fear of repercussion. So freedom of expression is not just for us an elite indulgence so that people like Salman Rushdie or another painter or writer can actually give vent to their artistic fantasies. Again, you cannot have dialogue unless you can say absolutely offensive things. Vulnerability is not a monopoly of the weak. Everybody feels vulnerable, particularly when they have to express thoughts or ideas that somebody else can find offensive. And without dialogue, you can't manage diversity. And without managing diversity, we're in deep trouble. Unfortunately, our schools don't teach us critical thinking. If I asked you how many of us here think critically, most hands will go up. Unfortunately, critical thinking is not what normally passes off as thinking. The Indian educational system is great at teaching people what to think. In other words, what you should know about chemistry, what you should know about history, what you should know about civics, moral science, but not how do you think about this and how do you make sense of the world. There's a good reason why people don't want us to think. Because it would be way too dangerous. So these four principles are what we believe can create a more robust democracy. Politicians talk about empowerment, it's in terms of dole. I can empower people by giving them grains of rice. I can empower them by giving them quotas. That's not empowerment. We need to ask ourselves what these words mean, what these concepts mean, and we need to rethink what they can mean. This is what the Public Intelligence Project intends to work on. Giving voice to everybody, not just to the weak and the vulnerable. This is important. You can't be selective about who gets a voice. Because if one person is silenced, trust me, it's a slippery slope. Voice has to be given. Collaboration requires trust. Collaboration requires making yourself vulnerable. Otherwise, we don't be collaborating. Most of the time, we are protecting our back. That's why collaboration is difficult. But there is a way we can actually create systems that can help people collaborate better. Real education, the education that allows you to think, doesn't exist in this society. We need that if we want to have an effective democracy. Being in the field of mediation and conflict resolution and peace building, part of what we are trying to do is coalesce other conflict resolution organizations across the world to stand up for dialogue. Because if we believe that dialogue is necessary, if we believe that diversity needs to be managed, we have to fight for the kind of conditions that can allow dialogue to take place.
You mentioned in one case you're doing a resolution in peace, other side you're doing a resolution between two communities, third a husband and wife. Are you saying that without being aware of local issues, on the top level itself, your mechanism is good enough to resolve these such diverse conflicts?
You must understand something. We are process people. In other words, what we bring, for instance, even when we go to an environment that we don't know, all we can do is help the people who are there, put a process in place for dialogue. We do not resolve it. Even when I'm working with a husband and a wife, I don't resolve the problem. I have no right to do that. All I can do is get them to engage in a more constructive dialogue.
If we have some sort of mandate to actually govern, I mean, that will help much more.
Neither Metaculture nor Public Intelligence Project has any interest in getting into the fray or being part of the electoral process. We see ourselves as a non-profit organization that functions outside of the political system, but whose mandate it is to strengthen the culture of democracy, not necessarily the way the system works at this point in time.
Why would I want to unnecessarily make myself obnoxious?
Right.
Not just me, but anybody.
Great. And this is one of the first things that we try to cure people of. The need for social approval or the approval of people around you. And I'm partly joking, but that's one of the reasons why a lot of injustice continues in the world. Because we have too many vested reasons for not speaking our mind. Because we'll piss off X or Y.
What kind of platforms
would one think of to enable dialogue between agencies which have no inherent conflicts but have conflicts coming out of external impulses? Competitive cooperation. That's the condition.
There are a couple of reasons why people would engage in dialogue. One is when all hope is lost, when you're really in trouble, then you come to the table. At that point, dialogue or negotiation, which also happens, is something that is meant to prevent further chaos or to solve a problem. But we prefer to actually deal with these situations before they get to that stage. Maybe even in if it's competitive collaboration or collaborative competition, whatever that might be, maybe you can actually create social environments where they can actually opt out and start enjoying each other's company, which will also create trust and which over a period of time can result in the kind of dialogue that you want.
Democracy is telling a man where the brake pedal is. The decision is his to hit it or not. So why to emphasize on democracy?
Why do we talk of democracy? I think it's because one, we live in a society that, or country that claims to be democratic. Two, I believe that whatever you call it, if we are able to have a system that allows for a very high degree of participation in terms of decision making, both local as well at a national level, we will have a better shot at managing the differences that is.
I mean, how important do you think an orderly but design is?
In an electoral system, absolutely. In a more participative process, particularly the dialogue, you have to start from who you are. Having said that, you must also provide design there to ensure that when you go out, you are not victimized for what you say here. And so one of the things we struggle with is creating what we call our safe zones, that where confidentiality is agreed upon by all the parties that come there. But so that's one kind of a closed room dialogue. But you can also have open space dialogue, the open room, large dialogue. In those cases, it's impossible to have any kind of confidentiality or anonymity. People need to know that they, as individuals or as members of certain groups, can actually speak out and be seen to be speaking out. You have to be able to bring everybody to the table, otherwise you don't have a solution.